if you're going to be successful, you're going to attract competition who's going to have the benefit of being able to look at what you've done, reverse engineer it, and figure out how to do it better. The best businesses are the ones that iterate so much that the competition can't keep up. And so you want to make sure there's some defensibility there of what you've done so far when you bring it to market, so that the moment that you actually have some success, you aren't vulnerable to like that immediately going away.
Welcome to Platform Builders, the podcast for leaders in software development to talk about the future of SaaS. I'm your host, Christine Spang, CEO of Nihilus, and I'm here with my co-host, Isaac Nassimi, our head of product. Each week, we'll be interviewing different builders to discuss the magic of software development. Platform Builders is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in developer-first startups. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on this show, or if you would like to suggest a topic, send us a DM on LinkedIn. Welcome to Platform Builders, the absolute best podcast out there to learn about the titans who build the tools you use every day.
We have with us today Jamie, who is the CEO at Vitally, the absolute best customer success platform out there, in my opinion. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Let's jump right into it, Jamie. First question for you is, can you tell us what a customer success platform is and how it's different from something like a CRM? Because every company probably does have a customer success platform, but they might not know it.
I would assume or hope at the very least everyone's using something to solve the problem that a customer success platform does. I mean, customer success platform at its core, organizes your disparate customer data into one place so that the team that is working with customers, typically your customer success team, can understand customers and can proactively engage them and be more strategic with them to help them onboard, implement the product, renew, and intervene if at all necessary during the customer journey.
So, in other words, what would happen if a company, let's say a SaaS company, didn't have a customer success platform?
Typically, it's offloaded to a support workflow where it's on the customer to reach out that they have a problem or that they need something. And that is, I think, fine at certain scales, perhaps, in certain products. But the more complicated your product gets, the more that a customer invests in it financially or from a resource perspective, the more that they're certainly, I think, looking for a bit more guidance to ensure that they get value, essentially, from what they pay for. And that support workflow where you're relying on the customer to tell you that they're experiencing a problem, that they're potentially going to churn, doesn't help you get ahead of what typically customers is trying to get ahead of, which is churn. They're trying to prevent the customer from canceling the subscription. And ideally, they're trying to grow and increase, your retention and your expansion through, again, that understanding of data and the workflows that they're building in the customer success platform.
Fantastic. Overall, though, I want to ask, how have you seen this space change over the past few years? Because I know you guys started as something a little bit different, something like a customer data layer. What made you make that change, and how have you seen this space change?
Yeah, the product's evolved a good bit because we've been around, officially, I guess, 8 years, but not in market for probably more than 5, I would say. But originally, the problem that I was really interested in was giving customer success teams a better understanding of how the product was being used by customers. I thought it was a pretty glaring weakness with the market at the time. A lot of the players in the space weren't really doing much with helping customer success teams truly understand product usage and that the customer was actually seeing ROI and where they were struggling. And I'm a former CTO who kind of accidentally and organically stumbled into customer success. And so product usage and analytics was part of my history and my training. And I saw a good opportunity to kind of help customer success teams better understand how customers were using that product. I learned that was a real problem, but I learned pretty quickly in the journey that we had to evolve into more of a workflow tool. The data filled in a piece of that puzzle, but teams wanted the puzzle. They wanted to be able to act on that data, to execute workflows, to send emails. An integration strategy was not going to work for us to kind of offload that to other folks. We had to bring those workflows into our product, which is when we then decided, we need to evolve into a full customer success platform backed by still really rich product analytics, which is still fundamental and foundational to our product. But we had to bring those workflows into our product to really solve the problem.
Wait, so rewind there a little bit. You said you were a CTO before, and then I know that you ended up becoming, chief customer officer of that company. That is a really unusual leap.
Yeah.
Tell me how that happened.
I did it to myself. I mean, we were a pretty small company. I think whenever I made the transition, we were like maybe 25 employees. But we work with big enterprises. So like Qualcomm, T-Mobile, HP, so they're all like customers of ours. We were like as enterprise as it gets. And we just kind of got ourselves in a bit of an interesting situation where we needed somebody with a better foundation, like understanding of the business and the product to really engage and like work with our customers. And so I thought it was an interesting kind of opportunity. I had really close like coworkers with me that were like strong engineering leaders as well. And so I saw a really good opportunity to kind of like pass the torch, solve a new problem. And so I was like, I'll move into customer success and start to understand our customers and understand how perhaps I can provide a more strategic arm of our business to like these big enterprises that were paying us, always for the most part, 6 figures plus to use our products. And, while I've been a CTO a couple times, but at its core, I'm a problem solver. And to me, it was just a new problem to solve and thought it was an interesting opportunity. And that introduced me to the world of customer success platforms. And here I am now, almost like 9 years later.
That's super cool. As someone who also came from the former CTO track, obviously I started Nihilus and I was CTO for a long time, and today I'm the CEO, which is a wild thing for me to think about sometimes. But I think that engineering gives you like a really great perspective to come into a lot of other different technology functions, especially since you have like a very sort of like systems mindset towards things and really kind of breaking apart problems and debugging them and being kind of structured in the way you kind of tackle solutions. I think it's a superpower in many ways.
Yeah, the best engineers are really good problem solvers. And so if you present a technical problem or a business problem or anything else, like if you can break down the components of it and come up with a good solution, you can solve a lot of things outside of the technical challenges.
Yeah. And I think that like you see this within kind of the engineering function as well, of like people going from like ICs to managers. You have to like learn to apply your debugging skill to inputs that seem a lot fuzzier than you're used to working to. And then from my point of view, just like going beyond that, it's kind of just like an extension of that path of like, well, it's a different set of axioms and different types of problems, but you can still kind of use the same approach at the end of the day.
For sure.
I'd love to just go back a little bit to almost like the architecture of the product that you were talking about a little bit before. Isaac mentioned that you started out as this sort of like data layer. How did that kind of like fit in people's tech stack at the time? Was it, so you were kind of like this source of truth collecting some set of data alongside a CRM? How did people interact with the product in that form?
Yeah, like it originally was purely actually integrated just with the product. We didn't even actually integrate with the CRM. This was before pre-revenue. This was like us trying to figure out like, what product market fit was going to look like for us.
Okay. So kind of early iterations and not necessarily something that was like used in production by customers.
We did have like, beta users using it and giving us feedback. And so we definitely had like, I think it was a few dozen like customers using it, and some that were, actually using it quite consistently and really liked it, but others, wanting to be able to, implement and execute on the workflows that the data was educating. Because that was the missing piece. It's like, okay, we tell you that, this really complex KPI that you need to do, and you need to track to understand customer success and the customer's like ROI with your product is like bad or good.
I see.
So like, and we didn't really connect that dot. So we, rather than offloading it to like Notion or like the CRM, we had to bring those into the.
So the first iteration was kind of focused on insights or just like measuring things.
It was more an analytics like data provider,
Okay.
Than it was anything else,
And then it sounds like the takeaway was that like the analytics are not that useful without action.
That's the unique thing about customer success is that like, everything that they do, whether they're sending an email, whether they're working on like some new internal process to like build their health scores or redefine their onboarding like workflow, it's all educated by customer data. It's all educated by like, the history of customers, what's worked, what hasn't and whatnot. And yeah, it was a very, very quick and frankly easy lesson to learn just by talking to customers to be like, okay, we know the starting problem that we can solve, but it's not the only problem that we need to solve. We have to continue along and now learn from the CRMs and from the customer success platforms at the time what they're doing to actually help educate that next step and then bring that next step into our product.
hmm Was it a challenge to get people to really kind of commit to buying another separate tool alongside their primary CRM in the early days? Like, I feel like it's pretty standard now, but definitely wasn't.
We didn't charge anybody. We didn't have pricing. It was just like, hey, use us. We actually went through an incubator or accelerator. I always get the two mixed up, but called Techstars, which is a big one, in here in New York. And so we worked with the Techstars network to like get early feedback and whatnot. But pricing came, I think, a year after that, and actually was organic in and of itself. We had customers reaching out and being like, hey, we want to use this now. Like, what do we pay you? And had to figure that out.
It can definitely be a little scary to start depending on a tool for vital workflows that is free. You start to wonder, like, how long are you guys going to be able to sustain just giving this to us?
Yeah. I get asked the question of like, if I could do this all over again, what would I change? Like, what was like one mistake I think we made along the way? I would actually say like charging customers was like a mistake. We should have done it later. Like our hand was forced in some ways, which is a good problem to have. You have customers wanting to pay you because they want to know you're going to be around. They want to know they can make that investment. But like, I still wanted to solve the problem in a little bit more of a different way. I wanted to be more confident in what we were bringing to market and like our product market fit. And so I actually wish we had been like, you can use it for free right now. Don't worry about it. We're not going anywhere. We're not going to charge though right now. It's a later problem for us. And I wish we had probably given it another 6 or 9 months before we had actually started pulling that trigger on revenue generation.
That was probably a pretty hard thing to sell to the team, to the investors, that you're not going to charge anything. How'd you get everyone bought into that?
Oh, I mean, even if you're not generating revenue in your early days, like there's a metric that is indication of like your potential to generate revenue, right? Like Figma's a great story where Figma didn't generate revenue for like a long time. And then they started generating revenue, I think it was like literally like 5 years ago. And they were, within a year or two, were at like some insane number. The revenue generation, at least from an investor's perspective, at least as somebody that, of course, has raised venture funding, like there's a different perception for a company that is revenue generating versus one that is specifically and purposely not revenue generating. Like the moment you start generating revenue, that's a metric that you are held accountable for and like you must report on. And so to directly answer your question, it was more, while we're not looking to generate revenue yet, like we're looking to make sure we go to product or go to market with the product we're most confident with. And we're going to measure ourselves on trials and like, just the funnel in general. The flip side of that narrative was I didn't want to start the clock on being held accountable to revenue generation until I was confident that number was going to shoot up and to the right consistently.
Honestly, that's pretty strategic and kind of smart in retrospect, because I think when you don't have revenue numbers, you get to really kind of drive the narrative with investors. And then when you get to a point where you have numbers, like, these people typically coming from a finance background are like, I understand this, and this is what it should look like at this point, and this is what will make me happy. And it can be harder to align that with the kind of the evolution that you see of kind of how your product is maturing.
I even try to to our early investors, again, like the first, a couple dozen customers are organically kind of paid. And I would try to communicate that while we are generating revenue, it's not a number that I think we need to fixate on right now. And like that wouldn't land. Like the moment you have revenue, the moment it's like, well, what's it now? And what's it now? Like, what's this growth rate and whatnot? And it's like, it's kind of interesting to play it back. It's like, well, if I just said, no, I don't want to take your money, it's interesting that changes the optics to like the investors and like they don't ask those questions anymore. But the moment you accept one person's money, it just changes the narrative and it changes what you're held accountable for.
But you had a clear view of what was the level of value you wanted to see people getting from the product before they started paying you. What was that? How did you decide?
We were entering a market that was already, around, right? There was already competitors. We weren't the first in market. And so for me, it was, am I confident that we can repeatedly beat the competition? And so that was more the indication. Of course, we measure that through our customer success. Like is the entire customer success team using the product? Are they relying on other tools to get other parts of their job done and not? So we, of course, measured that, but it was somewhat of an external measurement against like what the other players in the space were doing and trying to understand, like, is the competitive differentiation here obvious, defensible, and like, can we actually market it and like draw in like repetitive business? And so it was kind of a little bit more of a hard thing to quantify at the time for us. It was more or less just continuously looking at the market and ensuring that we were confident that, no matter who was going to be in a deal, that we could beat them.
So using kind of like a product management style simulation, looking at sort of the competitors and your differentiation, because like you weren't in deals right now. You couldn't measure like how often do we win and how often do we lose.
Yeah, I mean, well, we were working with customers who had experience with the market, right? And like they were unhappy with it. And so, yeah, there was part of it trying to figure out what was that. I don't like the term MVP. Actually, my designer calls it minimal lovable product, which I like actually better, like MLP. Minimal viable product makes it sound like it's too bare bones. But we were trying to figure out like what the MVP was to go to market with that also had the differentiation. At the time, the differentiation was the product analytics and really the also ease of integration. It's historically plagued our market with like just it taking too long to get the product implemented. And so we strategically invested in like easier to implement integrations from day one, paired with product analytics. And then it was the differentiation pair with like what's the MVP version of what people who have experience with our market expect. What's that intersection where we actually will now somewhat, beat the competition on a fairly regular basis.
I think it's really cool that you kind of like demonstrated a lot of value to customers such that they were organically wanting to pay you. And that's sort of how you bootstrapped the revenue generation at Vitally. How long did you feel like you could kind of stay in this pre-revenue state? Did you have to like go out and sort of structure your financing around that?
We raised a bit without any revenue, yeah, for sure. I mean, the clock was on. Yeah, like we didn't raise a huge round by any means. I would say that out of all the skills I have as a CEO, fundraising is middle of the pack. I'm not terrible at it. I'm not great at it. But I wasn't the type of CEO that was going to go raise, many millions of dollars just on like a vision and with no revenue. Like I'm an engineer. I always want to prove that what I'm saying is true, that I can actually execute on what I'm saying. And so we raised, I think it was like a few $100,000 or something like that coming out of Techstars without any revenue. And that was enough to get what was a very limited team at the time, myself, my co-founder, and one other engineer who had actually worked with me at my past company, enough to continue to, along that journey, methodically, carefully, even making sure we invested heavily in the product, getting the product right. But the clock was on. We didn't have infinite amount of time. We had to do it within, I think it was roughly like a year before the clock got close to midnight, essentially.
Now, I remember reading, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that you landed some awesome logos really early on, right? Like a Segment, Zapier, Product Board. It really actually some of the best products out there, like actual industry benchmark products and companies. At what point in your story did that happen, and how did you make that happen? I mean, that's so rare.
It was organic for all of them, actually. Segment was the first of the ones you mentioned. And I think Segment was like maybe like our 10th customer. And they actually reached out to us for a totally different reason. They were launching a new integration marketplace. And to my surprise, I did not know this. They said that we were one of like the top 5 most requested integrations that Segment did not have. And so they were going to launch this new integration marketplace, and they wanted to choose 5 new integration partners to build the integration with and launch with. And so they went through all the most requested, and we were one of those. And in that process, the CTO got familiar with our product and was impressed by it and was impressed with how easy it was to implement. And they had some not so great experience with the market themselves. And he had forwarded it to their customer success team to be like, hey, these people really seem to know what they're doing. I'm impressed with the tech. You should check it out. And so then all of a sudden now we had 2 conversations going on with Segment. It was, how do we launch this integration and how do we actually become your official customer success platform? We were actually able to do both. That kicked off a new world for us. Actually, the integration launch in Segment was probably one of the most like critical points for our success, because they put a lot of their marketing firepower behind it to make sure that it was a success. They promoted, here's the 5 partners that we partner with. We were one of them. We were front and center in a lot of their marketing materials in their integration marketplace. that led to, I think, the Zapiers and the product boards, but it was all organic. That was done with like no salespeople, inbound requests to see what the product was capable of. Eventually, of course, it led to a full-fledged sales team, but I had to put on the sales hat and try to get those deals over the finish line myself in those days.
Well, when those kind of leads come in organically, I think people consider that the equivalent of just receiving a check in the mail randomly or winning the lottery, but there's something behind that, right? You said Segment was your 10th customer, and at the same time, you were the most requested integration. That logically tells me that all of your existing customers were demanding integrations from Segment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It really just appears that you focused so much on value. I always think that the sign of good product thinking is what's technically called long-term greediness, right? Where instead of being short-term greedy and trying to take everything you can, in order to build the most value long-term, you have to focus on value and helping others. Not everyone can get in that mindset, and very few people can stay in that mindset for a period of time as the clock is ticking on runway. How would you recommend people both get and stay in that mindset and hold the line as their team or their investors are demanding that they start to collect as much money as possible?
I mean, it's just business, right? Like if you're going to be successful, you're going to attract competition. The competition is going to build off of you. You know, everybody builds off of somebody, right? Like iterations, something leads to something else, leads to something else. And so the best businesses are the ones that iterate so much that the competition can't keep up. That, you know, you are iterating and then you don't rest easy and then you iterate again. And then you don't rest easy and you iterate again. And so what I would say is like, you want to make sure that when you go to market, of course, you all want to be successful. But if you are, you're going to draw on competition who's going to have the benefit of being able to look at what you've done, reverse engineer it, and figure out how to do it better. And so you want to make sure there's some defensibility there of what you've done so far when you bring it to market, so that the moment that you actually have some success, you aren't vulnerable to like that immediately going away by a competitor who just does it better. And then again, you just got to iterate and continue iterating because the competition will learn from you. They'll figure out how you did something. They'll figure out how to do it maybe slightly better because it's always easier to solve the problem the second time and not the first time. And you just got to keep your foot on the gas that way.
That's absolutely incredible. And I think that there's a lot of hustle culture in startups, right? Like the word iterate is used a lot. And I think what often people hear is like, do everything. And if you can think of another thing, just start doing that too. How did you get your team to choose the right things to iterate on? Because finding product market fit is more than just putting the time in. It's putting in the focus as well.
Yeah.
How did you drive that focus? How did you achieve product market fit truly?
It happened with a different version of the platform that actually even exists today. And so the original like product market fit was found with what I would say is a more traditional take on like the customer success platform. Sure, we differentiated with like product analytics and ease of integration, and with like UI and UX and things like that. But it was an opinionated platform. And by that, I mean like we sat down and tried to understand what truly does like the CSM need to see or the VP of customer success need to see. So we would present our data and our workflows like, here are your customers, here's your churn, here's your revenue dashboard, here's your renewal dashboard. And we would have to like one-off, again, we've been presented with a problem and we would have to solve the problem. That found product market fit in the traditional customer success platform landscape. But again, iterations, I didn't rest easy. And in fact, like the motivation was a Series B raise was it 2025? So in 2022, Fincher like basically shut down. Like, it was hard. It was almost impossible to raise a growth round. And we were wanting to raise a Series B. I was at the time like, again, we were doing well and generating good revenue, but I was like, I don't know if I can go raise a growth round in this market by just being like, hey, we're a customer success platform and we're better with integrations like product analytics and these things. And so I wanted to find a new narrative, a new vision, which would help my team kind of like think about the product differently. And that's what you see now. We instead pivoted away from like, how do we solve the problems for our customers to more of like a building block, like a toolkit kind of methodology, like almost like a Notion or like a ClickUp kind of methodology. It's like, how do we actually though, instead of trying to figure out how we solve the problems, how do we reverse engineer what we've done, create the building blocks that our customers can put together to solve not only problems in their ways, but solve problems maybe they're not even thinking about. So we went with a more of like a flexible, almost like low code, like no code kind of approach to our product, with the thought being it's going to be heavily focused on flexible project management, flexible reporting, flexible automation, just all powered by your customer data. And that narrative of like your data and then the work you need to get done on top of that data is of course important to customer success, but it's not just customer success. That can influence support and sales and even product teams and things like that. And so we wanted to branch out and become more of like a cross-functional like collaboration platform, just with your customer data and workflows at its core. That's kind of what we raised that Series B narrative on. We did it in the fall of 2022, got the Series B done and then completed that product. And that's our vision now. It's like less so like, I don't know if you'll ever invitally log in and day one see like, here are your renewals. It's not a problem that we're really focused on solving anymore. You can do it, of course, but we're not going to sit down and say that's the first thing you should see. We're going to suggest some things, but it's going to be up to you and you're going to have the control to kind of change it yourself.
Give me some examples of like the first things someone's going to see.
I mean, it varies per customer. Like an executive can have a dashboard that just showcases the growth of their business, churn per segment, and whatnot. As the first thing, a VP of customer success can log in and understand what's the work that my team is doing, how much work is open per CSM, what's the NRR per CSM. They can choose to see that. Of course, the CSM has a different journey, though. They don't need to necessarily see like that kind of high-level dashboard. Maybe they're only focused on like, what are my customer meetings and what are the work I need to get done today? And so we want the entire business to benefit from our product because the data that we have is, I would argue, the most valuable data to the business. It is almost everything the CRM has. It is how customers are using your product. It is an understanding of revenue and how it grows and when it contracts and why it contracts and when customers churn and why they churn. That is data that is not just beneficial to customer success. It's beneficial to everyone. And our mission now is to how to like unlock that data and unlock the workflows on top of that data so that it can better not just customer success, but better the entirety of the business. And that requires that more flexible approach that we now take today.
I want to know how you operationalize that, like internally with your employees, with your engineers, with your product people, all of that. I know that you guys shifted over from like QBRs to what are they, value reviews, right?
Yeah, I gave a talk on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear about that and if you think that's part of what drives it or your culture or just where you think the secret sauce is.
Well, that is an example of something that we came up with as an example of like, perhaps there are better ways to leverage the data that we have and build better processes. Customer success, it's the newest function in an organization, right? Like it existed after marketing, it existed after sales, it existed after product, it existed after all these things. And so because of that, it's not gone through a lot of iterations. It was basically invented in the late 2000s, early 2010s, only became ubiquitous in the early 2010s. That was a high touch, white glove, very kind of wine and dine approach to customer success. In the middle 2010s, the late 2010s, scaled and tech touch customer success started to become a thing. And so one of our top principle as a company is question convention. Like just because something is conventional is the way it's done doesn't mean it's the way it should be done. And so MVR was an example of that. Like we are all talking about QBRs. Everybody knows what a QBR is, but it today feels like it's a little old fashioned. It requires the customer to sit in a meeting for an hour and a half, listen to the most polished version of the story that the vendor wants to tell them because the vendor wants, typically QBRs are almost like late minute decisions to try to get a signal if their customer is going to renew or not. Like I'll schedule a QBR to see if there's any trouble here. And that's not the most valuable use of the customer's time. So the MVR was kind of like almost a needle in that regard. It's like, maybe we don't need to do it this way. Maybe if we had a better approach to how to like solve the problem of just delivering value to the customer, because that's what the QBR is supposed to do. It's supposed to communicate value. Can we do that in a more efficient and collaborative way? Do we really need to get the customer in a Zoom, have everybody sit down for an hour and a half of time? Or can we just showcase to them value on a recurring basis, on a quicker time frame? Let them consume that, comment where they need to, slack some questions over, something like that, and free that hour and a half block that the customer has to do for the QBR up for something else. And that's applied to our product. Is that like just because our market has historically taken that opinionated approach of like, how do I show the best renewals dashboard? How do I implement the best like risk process? Doesn't mean that's the way that we have to do it. we can learn from what I think the work platforms have done, the Notions, the ClickUps, the Asanas of the world, who kind of went in the low, the no code kind of like route of like, it's a platform that can flexibly solve a whole bunch of problems. Can we learn from that and kind of head a little bit more in that direction and less so in the like opinionated, sit down, solve all these specific problems ourselves kind of direction? And so that question convention was kind of core to getting people thinking in a new direction, to the MVR thing, and a lot of things that we do.
That's really interesting to hear in terms of just like how to iterate on driving more value to customers as you have these sort of longer term relations. And when I think about the history of customer success, it's really something that like has evolved hand in hand with B2B SaaS. Like if you're just selling somebody a packaged CD with software on it, like you don't have customer success, you just have support. But now that over the past 15 years, software has been really delivered primarily through the cloud and through these services. Like, we essentially have developed these long-term relationships with people, and you want to kind of partner with them and grow over time because you're constantly able to iterate and ship new features and sort of work together to drive mutual success. I think it's really interesting to kind of look at what's happening all around us and think a little bit about kind of where things are going in general. Like the 2010s were kind of like the era of SaaS, but the 2020s are looking to be the era of AI, and certainly beyond that. How are you thinking about how AI is something that can help drive value for Vitaly's customers? It sounds like you have a vision around how, at least in Vitaly's case, you sort of started from a place of more specificity on sort of defining workflows and bringing best practices in terms of workflows in this area of customer success to people. And now sort of what you're seeing is a demand to actually expand from there and to become more flexible. I think there's another piece sort of under this around like what data lives where and how do you make use of that data. And then there's this whole kind of other elephant in the room around like, does B2B SaaS even exist in 5 years or 10 years? Is it all going to be agents? Are we just going to be talking to computers? Where is it going? So give me your hot takes on AI.
Where to start? At our core, we do two things. We organize your customer data so that you can understand it, and then we help you get work done on top of it. And we can and will apply AI to both areas. Like we can apply it to help you better understand your customers, to enrich your data at scale, to showcase to you, like especially in customer success, we deal with a lot of raw text, right? Meeting transcripts, customer conversations and emails, Slack messages. Buried in those are critical insights. Like if a customer writes in or like in a meeting says, I need to see feature X and Y, otherwise I might turn to competitor Z. Like in that are structured in very critical data points that are not going to do any good unless somebody currently manually goes and like tracks those somewhere and like writes it down, right? But like the world of AI is good at extracting those kind of insights out. And so we can apply AI to help customer success teams get that data at scale. And then of course, apply it to the workflows, like make them more productive, make them more efficient, help them actually, write the best version of like a doc or an email that is being sent to the customer. And so I think AI is great and will be great for that. I think the biggest challenge in the world of today's AI is you got to crawl, walk, run. Maybe we're out of the crawl stage right now, but if we are, we're barely there with AI. Like we're heading into walk territory. And my issue with a lot of what's happening right now is, especially like the venture narrative, is like just trying to drive everybody to run. And by that, I mean like they think AI is going to solve all the problems. I think what that does is those overlooks human behavior and tendencies. Like, we've been trained to use software in very particular ways for the last 20 years. We don't just immediately overnight change it because AI is getting shoved down our throats. And so I think the challenge with AI today is how do we bake it in the best way possible? It's like a UI UX challenge. Rather than, and especially for us, like rather than positioning the problem as let AI do the job for you, it is suggestions, not, actual execution. And so how can we actually suggest and organically bake AI into all of these things while not necessarily trying to train the user do exactly what it's saying or to trust exactly what it's saying. Especially in customer success, like with the data that we're getting from the CRM, from product, from revenue tools, from customer communications, from survey responses, from all this, like it's just so much that is hard to say that AI is going to get it all right all the time. And we have to do a human-led approach with AI for customer success so that it aids what customer success teams are doing and not try to, today, at least in today's world, look at it as a full replacement. And that narrative is going to continue for many years. I think that though the narrative of AI replacing and changing everything in the near term is not quite as near term as we all think, but I might be wrong. Who knows?
It seems like one thing that you're getting at is that the user interface with SaaS software today tends to be like very optimized and sort of straightforward for specific workflows, and it points people in certain directions. Whereas, at least if you're just sort of talking to a text interface or voice interface, it's like very, very flexible. How do you think we might like constrain that over time to like retain some of the benefits of sort of pointing people to specific workflows, but still have some of that flexibility that comes from sort of new paradigms?
It's on us as the product people. I don't know. We're trying to figure it out ourselves. Like we're literally working on this problem like right now of how do we have the AI sort of like suggest things and help complete that next step without overly relying on the next step. It's especially critical in customer success. I think like you've seen support tools be revolutionized by AI already, and it makes a ton of sense. Because, and I'm going to say something that's maybe a little bit loaded, but like people expect kind of a bad support experience. like support, the bar for a support experience is lower than the bar for a customer success experience. And so if you go to, a website to try to talk to AI, we've been trained over the past even like decade plus to talk to a bot for a bit before we actually get to a human. But a lot of us also try to shortcut that, like give me a human. Customer success, that bar is much higher. Like, the first impression in the customer experience is everything. And so that's the thing that I would want all of us in customer success to ask ourselves is like, what do we hear from customers? Do we hear customers say that they want, customer success replaced by AI? I'm not hearing that. They specifically want someone that they know understands them as guiding them along. And so like a good example is, AI writing you an email. I've seen it already where it actually degrades the experience because the user trusts the AI. They want to get the job done. They want to move on to the next thing. And so they don't edit what the AI did correctly. And so they end up sending the customer something too boilerplate or something that has duplicate content. And that can cascade in customer success. Where in support, that can be shrugged off and you can be like, stupid AI bot. And customers is like, I paid for a human to, help me here. And this is clearly not a human. What are you doing? And that's an interesting challenge for us in customer success is how to organically bake in AI without removing that human element from the equation.
Yeah, I guess the entire point of customer success is to have a human-driven, tailored approach to customers that is very adaptable. And I think it's a really good insight that you have to kind of look at like what is the bar for expectations in any given area when you sort of think about like, will AI make this better? And in some places, that's going to be a yes. And in some places, that's going to be definitely not today. But things are changing fast.
Yeah, they are.
We'll see where we're at in a year.
Yeah.
Cool. With that, I think it's a good time for us to jump into our picks section. This is a fun thing we like to do where everyone shares something that is capturing their attention. It could be a tool, it can be a media thing, a book, a show. Really anything that you're just excited about right now. So, Isaac, you want to kick things off? Do you have a pick for this week?
Yeah, I do. There are these things that I call intellectual primals, which are, maybe articles or books or things that you come back to from time to time that like truly shape the way you think about reality. And one of my intellectual primals is it's an article called "You Can't Reach the Brain Through the Ears." And it's without a doubt my favorite article I've ever read of all time. It's a blog post by this guy who does a podcast called Experimental History. And man, I just keep coming back to it like every 6 months or something and rereading it and reminding me that when you're trying to convince people of something, that you can't just through speech take these very complex ideas, these symphony ideas that are happening in your brain, and turn them into this like single track language and put it in their head. And it's helped me so much think about communication, because you're thinking of something complex and you're saying it and they're hearing something else. They're hearing just a very reduced resolution version of it. And it's really just helped me with introducing people to complex ideas. For example, like if I'm working with someone internally and trying to get them to understand what AI agents can do for them, right? If they were really working and building those things, what they hear is very different than what I think until I really fully explain it to them. Would highly recommend Googling and reading that article. You can't reach the brain through the ears. My favorite of all time.
Cool. I'm Googling it right now. What about you, Jamie? Do you got a pick for this week?
So again, I've been a CTO of a company, two different companies actually in the past, and I actually still try to code a little bit today, just to kind of keep up. And recently started to try to figure out how to bake AI into my coding habits, exploring Cursor, the AI code editor, and I've heard phenomenal things. I haven't fully been able to like bake it into what I'm doing yet, which is the challenge with the AI workflows. How do I start to learn a different way of approaching something that I've been doing a particular way for almost 20 years. But I'm excited to evolve my approach to that and see if I can have greater impact through some AI code editor. I'll give Cursor a shout out, but not an endorsement yet. I haven't used it enough.
That's so cool. I really agree. Everyone should be trying it if you're a coder. And you're talking about AI writing emails for you, and you're like, God, like it's just writing the, AI slop, right? Generic stuff. And man, Cursor really reads your mind, and it kind of it feels like it knows what you're trying to do, which is so rare.
Yeah, it's like how do if you can solve minutes or save minutes or hours, I'll accept more variability on like the output. I'm like, maybe this isn't exactly what I want to do. I guess I got to do it manually. The email example is like it's saving seconds. I don't want the variability. I want to know that the output is there and it's going to work the way that I want it to. I'll take the 100% accuracy of me doing it myself over the saved seconds. But the minutes or the hours or even the day is an interesting area where, I'm excited to see how it can go.
So I have a pick for this week, and it's a book, and it is it's kind of a classic book, I would say, in that it's from 2015, which was 10 years ago. But it's called The Sales Acceleration Formula by this guy, Mark Roberge, who was the guy who built HubSpot's early sales team, or really kind of like their first few years. They grow super fast. And the reason this book is my pick is because I mentioned actually earlier that I also used to be the CTO, and now I'm the CEO. And for the longest of time, I had a business partner whose focus was on sales and marketing. And I just sort of like compartmentalized that off of my brain. I was like, this is like somebody else's main job, and I don't need to really like rock it too much. But being sort of thrown into the space where that's not the case anymore, I really felt like I needed to just like get a deeper understanding of sales and marketing. And Mark Roberge has an engineering background, and I found it really helpful just in that, he sort of lays things out in a very sort of systematic way and explains the big picture in a way that just like really made sense to me. And I found it really helpful just to kind of have that sort of foundation. And, some of it's a little bit dated, but I think it's also really cool to see that, for one of these examples in kind of the technology section in the back of here is around email logging, which apparently I guess they built some internal automation for that with HubSpot back in the day, 10 years ago. And it's really interesting from my perspective in that, like, starting in kind of the 2017 era, a lot of people started using Nihilus to build that kind of email logging for CRM type apps. And really today, it's kind of just like something that you assume you're going to have in any app like this, because the example it brings up is that, like sales technology was built for execs or sales leaders, not for the ICs, and really just creates work for the ICs. And, this was 2015. And so the kind of the leading edge back in that era was to, build some automation tech that automatically did, the logging of those messages in the CRM. And I think it's super cool to see how like the table stakes of things has evolved. And yeah, it was just funny to read it in the back of this book when I've seen it sort of happen live.
Awesome. Jamie Davidson, CEO of Vitally, the best customer success platform out there. Thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for your time. And if anyone out there wants to have the best customer success team out there and one that's operating off of the data that's happening from the product usage and the business and all that, and getting those renewals and making customers happy, then definitely give Vitally a shot.
Yeah, we here at Nihilus are a happy customer as well. So appreciate the support from you on that point, Jamie. And thanks for taking the time to come on the show. It's been awesome to have you.
I appreciate you all having me. This was a lot of fun.
That's all we have time for today. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, send us a DM on LinkedIn. This show is brought to you by Heavybit, the leading investor in developer-first startups. To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com.